Alrighty, this is a lecture for part 5 in our textbook, Delivery. This is chapters 16, 17, and 18. So, as an overview, this is what each of the chapters go over and what we are going to go over. So, chapter 16 is methods of delivery, chapter 17 is your voice in delivery, chapter 18 is your body in delivery. So, we're talking about delivery today. So, methods of delivery. We have 4 different types. For our first 2 we're going over is speaking from a manuscript and speaking impromptu. Speaking from a manuscript, that is reading word for word from a prepared written text. So you have, fully written something and you are reading it word for word. You would do this when you need to address an emergency or convey a precise message. So if you're like the CEO of a business and there is some sort of crisis that has occurred and you need to address everyone, you would use a manuscript because you want to make sure that you are saying the correct things. The pros to speaking from a manuscript, it helps avoid misinterpretation. Make sure you say everything that you need to say. So you're not forgetting anything and you're not leaving room for different kinds of interpretation, because when you write the prepared text, you are making sure that you are conveying exactly what you need to say. Cons, it restricts your eye movement and eye contact, restricts your body movement, and restricts your expressiveness. So you would be reading from a piece of paper and you were just reading off, You don't make eye contact with people. You're stuck right there and you're kind of playing. But this is what is good for an emergency, because you don't want to, you don't want to cause panic. You don't want to make it like, you don't want to make it like extra. You don't want to be extra when you're doing this. Using this form can make the speaker be a little bit boring, but that's what you need in an emergency. You're not doing this to entertain people, you're doing it to inform people. And especially in a state of emergency, you don't have time to practice, so this is why you'd use a manuscript. Then speaking impromptu, it's an unpracticed, spontaneous, and improvised way of giving a speech. You would do this if you were filling in for someone at work or if you were at like an open mic. I don't know if you guys ever seen like the impromptu like comedy or like the improvised comedy where they stand up and they just, they make something funny out of literally just being up there and hanging out. So pros, this allows for a lot of expressiveness. You basically get to do things off rip with your personality, and you can be as expressive as you need. Cons, you really need to know the information that you're conveying well if you're going to speak impromptu. So if you're giving an improvised speech on some sort of topic, you really need to know what you're talking about. You need to be like a researcher, a scientist, professor, or just someone that knows like really, really, really a lot about it. Like, from experience, or from, life experience pretty much. And then cons, other cons, you don't get any preparation time. You literally have to like get up there and speak, and it's hard to stay on topic, because unless you have done this a lot and you really know what you're talking about, sometimes people can go on tangents and things like that. Then for our other types of speaking is speaking from memory and speaking, no matter how many times I say this word, I can never get it right, extemporaneously. I think that's right. So speaking from memory, it's giving a prepared speech without using a written text. So you have prepared this speech beforehand and have practiced it so much that you can do it without your resource, without the text. You would do this for very small, brief speeches like a toast, but you will usually memorize only sections of your speech instead of all of it. So if you're speaking from memory, usually you will not be able to do your speech word for word because that is really, really hard to do. Instead, many people memorize the points that they want to give, and then they pretty much improvise their speech by speaking from memory. And if you did something like a toast, that's literally like you get up and, you're like, a toast to whoever for doing such a good job. It's pretty easy to do that one from memory because it's very short. Prose, it helps you stay very connected to the audience. You are making eye contact, not looking at a text or anything, and you're addressing the audience since it is a brief speech. And then it is very easy to be expressive as well. So if you're speaking from memory, you're also improvising a little bit. You're putting some of your own personality in there. And then cons, it is really difficult to memorize things like direct quotes, and you always have a possibility of forgetting what you were talking about, which is horrifying if you're giving a speech and you're speaking from memory and you forget. Been there. It's fine. You'd get over it. And then speaking extemporaneously, you prepare and practice in advance, but you speak from an outline. So you have a prepared text that is an outline, but you prepare so much that you only need to reference it a little bit. This is what you will most often use in your life. It's what most people use when they give a speech. And in this class, this is what you're using. You're not using any of the other three. You are speaking extemporaneously. Prose, this allows for eye contact and have a resource if you forget. So you have that resource, but you don't need to be reading off of it because you practice. So you're, giving really good eye contact. You have that resource, though. If you do forget where you're at, you can look down and reference it and know what you're doing. It helps you stay natural as a speaker, so you're not being very, rigid and formal. You're giving a natural kind of, natural speaking kind of speech. And then it also gives you greater flexibility when giving the speech, because if you want to improvise, you can. If you want to stay, with the outline, you can. If you want to be more expressive, less expressive, you can. It's easier to do it that way. And then the cons, you can accidentally rely too much on the outline. So, like many of you with the first speech, which it's just a first speech, so it's fine, you're, reading off of it. You're like, these three things from my bag are 1 and 2 and 3. No. We're not doing that. That is a huge con, and you'll get points off for doing that. The textbook and my personal experience say that you need to practice about 6 times to really, really get it. Sorry, my dog's in here. Come here. Ashley, come here. Hi. Okay, go on. Get out of here. Get out of here. Go. Out. Sorry about that. He will probably come back in, but I'm going to close that door. Alrighty. Moving on. Using your voice. So, you're going to want, when you're speaking, you're going to want to adjust your volume, rate, intonation, and kind of depends on where you're giving the speech, who you're giving the speech to, what kind of speech you're giving, on how you use your voice by adjusting it. So with your volume, you're going to want to take the size of the room, whether or not you're using a microphone, and any background noise into consideration. If there's a lot of background noise, or if you're in a large room not using a microphone, you have to speak loudly. You have to adjust your volume up to be higher. If you're in a small enclosed room, or if you're using a microphone, or there's minimal background noise, you don't have to be as loud. Of course, you need to be as loud as you need to be so the people in the back hear you. That's why in a lot of your classes, you might have a professor that's like, hey, can you guys back there hear me? They want to make sure that their volume is correct. You can always do that before you're giving your speech. You can get up there and make sure everyone can hear you. Rate. If your rate is too slow, you will lose the audience. We think a lot faster than we can speak, so if you're speaking very slow, your audience is going to get bored and they're not going to pay attention to you anymore. However, if you speak too fast, you're going to confuse your audience. You're going to seem like you're rushing through and maybe even nervous, and your audience is going to get confused because they can't really understand you when you're speaking fast. So you're going to want to make sure that you are speaking at a, middle of the road kind of rate. Intonation, you're going to want to make sure you convey the correct mood and avoid being monotone. You put a lot of work into your speech. Imagine preparing and then doing your speech and feeling like it went well and you were monotone. That's a big, ruiner of speeches. If you're monotone, people are going to get so bored of your speech and they're going to think that you're bored of your speech. So you're going to want to make sure you sound like your energy is good, somewhat enthusiastic. If you're giving a speech on something sad, make sure you're a little bit more serious. If you're giving a speech on something that you like, you can be a little bit less serious. Of course, you want to take all speeches seriously, but if you're giving a speech on frogs versus a eulogy, you're going to be a little bit less serious on the frogs one. And then ways to use your voice effectively. You're going to want to take strategic pauses. Pauses help emphasize a point and give the audience a moment to think. So, that was not a strategic pause, by the way. That was me thinking. If you want to give a strategic pause, you could ask, if you ask a question, you're going to want to give a pause. So, have any of you guys held a frog before? Then you give the audience to think about, have I held a frog before? Yes or no. If you are, if you gave a really good statement, something that you want people to really absorb, you're going to want to take a strategic pause. Strategic pauses can also help you as well if you feel like you're getting a little bit nervous and you're going way too fast and you need to chill a little. You can take a strategic pause, take a breath. A lot of speakers like to have a water bottle, a cup of water, or something, so they can pick that up and take a sip as their strategic pause. Also, strategic pauses help reduce vocal fillers. So, if you're taking a pause, you're less likely to be Instead of saying you just don't say anything at all. It's helpful. Then vocal variety. You're going to want to vary all aforementioned elements with a tone of enthusiasm. So you're varying your volume, rate, and intonation. You're not being monotone, We're not saying, if you want to be a little enthusiastic, you don't want to stay up here the whole time. You're going to want to go up and down a little bit. You really want to bring the energy. Bring the energy, whether that energy is serious, angry, happy, sad, whatever. Bring that energy. Make your audience feel it. And you can do that with vocal variety. And then pronounce and articulate words. So mumbling reduces your credibility. If you mumble through your speech, 1, your audience cannot understand you, and 2, they're going to think that you are less credible on this subject because of your mumbling. You're also going to want to be clear being clear will make people want to listen to you. So if you are able to pronounce your words and articulate them well, people are going to want to listen to you. This is not saying if you have a thick accent of some sort to get rid of that accent. Definitely don't do that. But you're going to want to speak loudly and speak clearly so your audience can understand you. Then body language and delivery. We have 4 different types of body language and how that can affect your delivery. So we got facial expressions. Those relay our emotions. If you have a flat expression, no matter what your vocal variety is like, no matter what your intonation is like, people are going to think you're bored. So you're going to want to convey your emotions on your face. Smiling is going to make your audience like you. So even if you're giving a speech on something serious, in the beginning when you say, "Hi, my name is whatever," you're going to want to smile. Smiling can also help you feel less nervous. That is true. That is a scientific thing that I won't understand because I'm not a science person. If you smile more, it's going to make you feel happy, and it's going to make you feel more confident, and it's going to help you feel less nervous. Especially if you smile at your audience and you get smiles in return, you're going to feel better. Then posture, standing up straight with your chin high will make you feel / look confident. So if you're not feeling too confident, stand up straight. We're not saying chin up high like that, but like chin up. We're not like this. Chin up, back straight. You're confident. And if you've ever watched that TED Talk on the Wonder Woman pose, it's really great. If you haven't, go check it out. You can find it on YouTube. I can even I'll put a link to it. But that's basically, you're standing, not legs super wide, but legs like shoulder width apart, hands on your hips, like this, and you stand up straight and tall, like Wonder Woman. That's going to make you feel a lot more confident. That is something that I do before I give speeches when I'm feeling very nervous. It helps a lot. And also, if your posture is good, it gives you a lot more credibility. If you feel and look confident, even if you don't feel confident, if you look confident, people are going to be confident for you, basically. They're going to see you and be like, yep, this person knows exactly what they're talking about. And then eye contact. Making eye contact will force your audience to pay attention. If I were giving this lecture or this class in general in person, you would see that I like to make a lot of eye contact with students. I look around the room and I make eye contact, especially those that are not paying attention. I like to stare at until they do. So when someone is in your audience and they're not paying attention, a good way to make them pay attention is to look at them and make eye contact with them. Even, you can see it on people's faces, they're looking at you, but they're just looking. They're not paying attention. You looking at them will make them pay attention. You can also gauge your audience's feelings by looking at them. So if they're looking bored, to do something a little bit more interesting, move on to the next point, take a strategic pause, or stare at them more. You do those things. And then gestures and movements. A lot of you will see that you got points off for swaying or pacing. It is way too distracting. Swaying is like this. A lot of people do this. Or walking back and forth. It's okay to take a couple steps here and there, but if you're constantly walking back and forth, it is way distracting. Same as using too many gestures, it is distracting. So if you're like, people are going to pay attention to your hands a lot more than your speech. And then make sure you use gestures that are natural to you. If you don't, it's going to look weird, unfortunately. If you don't use a lot of gestures, that is fine. You don't need to use gestures. If you are, I'm sure you can see that I make a lot of gestures. I usually make mine to help, make a point. That is fine. As long as you're not using too many gestures. And then this is going to be an activity. I will give points out for doing this activity. So basically, you're going to look at all these people. You can pause. You're going to look at all these people, and you are going to, starting from top left, going over, and then going down the next row, going over to the right. Starting top left is number 1, and then on its right is number 2, so on and so forth. When you get to the end, you go down to the next row, starting at the left, going to the right. That's how you're going to number them. And you are going to give me the emotion for each of these people. If you do this activity and you try and you get, at least 75% correct, at least 75% of them correct, I'll give you full points. If you don't do this, 0. It's not a lot of points, so if you really don't feel like doing it, your grade's not going to suffer, but I suggest you do it. It's easy points, and if you don't do it, don't ever ask me for extra credit. So yeah, you're basically going to name all of these emotions. It's kind of helpful to, see it so you can maybe copy those emotions for when you want to convey, or copy those facial expressions when you want to convey a certain emotion. Or if you're looking out in the crowd and they're looking at you a certain way, it helps you figure out, what's going on. So, facial expression, body language, example. So if you look at these 3 people, think to yourself, what kind of vibe are they giving off? Is it a good one? Is it a bad one? You can pause and think about it. This guy on the left here, terrible posture, terrible facial expressions, very closed inward. He does not look like he cares. That is not an effective way to show your body language and facial expression. It's not a good way to give a speech. Now this guy on the top here, he is confident. He is standing up straight. He's using minimal gestures. He knows what he's talking about. He's also dressed well. I look at this guy and I'm like, he knows exactly what he's talking about. And then we see this lady down here. It's a different kind of confident. She is shoulders up, chest back, like this. She looks open. She looks like she's conveying, almost like power to me. She's like, I don't know what she's giving a speech on, but she looks exactly like she knows what she's talking about. And I'm hoping it's on orangutans because I can see that one right back there. But yeah. The best way to be able to, give vocal variety and use your voice effectively, to make sure you have the right facial expressions and make sure you have the right body language, is to plan ahead and practice often. We're speaking extemporaneously. We are practicing at least 6 times. A way that I like to practice this is to stand in front of the mirror and give my speech to myself, just so that I make sure that I'm using the correct facial expressions and body movements and I'm not doing too many gestures. You can also do a video and watch that video back. I personally hate that because I don't like hearing my voice. If you're fine with it, you can do that. But yeah, make sure you practice often.